We're going to take you live right now to Montreal, where Hydro-Quebec is providing an update on the ice storm cleanup. Hundreds of thousands of people still without electricity. Let's listen into what they're saying.
Sur le terrain, il y en a plus de 1400 au moment où on se parle, qui font un travail assidu et
working hard on the ground at this moment. We're very intense. We want to thank you because it's difficult, especially with the Easter holiday. And secondly, I want to remind the citizens that you have to be cautious. Branches, wires, we don't take them apart. People are there. Barbecues outside. And also free up the roads, and there's progress. And many municipalities have set up warming centers across the province. In Laval, for example. So we're there as a government to help people who need. And I thank a lot the work from Hydro-Quebec and their hard work. Thank you, Mr. Minister. So an update for the weather. Today it's clear but very windy, 50 to 75 kilometer per hour gusts. So we'll have to look at that situation. Will that create new outages? But we're in the same readings that we had. We're still trying to reestablish 800,000 customers by the end of the day. We're up to 500,000 at this time, so that's the goal for the day, and that's the way we're working. And the Laurentians, Lanaudière is 33,000, Laurentian 85,000, Montérégie 97,000, Montreal 327,000, and Outaouais 53,000. And in Estrie, those are the major regions that have been impacted. We maintain priority to the outages with the major customers. We have 229 outages with over 1,000 customers, so those are the priorities. And as the minister said, 1,400 workers on the ground, lots of help. People have been deployed yesterday to respond for the branches that are falling, because as you know, when we bring in certain outages on the main thoroughfares, there were other outages that we couldn't see on the more secondary roads, and now customers, 1,400 outages were added that we have to go and intervene in order to reestablish power. And we're seeing the impact of the delays due to these new outages that have cropped up. So that's their update.
So a couple of highlights in English. So as I just mentioned, the only weather situation we are monitoring today is a small wind gust of around 70 kilometers per hour that maybe could generate a little bit more of outages. As total client restores since yesterday, we have now more than 500,000 customers where the power has been restored. We are still aiming at restoring more than 800,000 by the end of today, so leaving us with roughly around 300,000 customers left without power. The major regions still affected are Montreal, with just above 300,000 customers out of service. Laurentide area with 60,000, Laval 81,000, and Outaouais also 53,000. So mainly the same region as yesterday. The workforce, we have even more people than yesterday, so more than 1,400 people on the field, working very hard to restore power as soon as possible to everybody. We're looking at, as we said yesterday, still having some outages for sure on Sunday, and maybe a couple more on Monday.
Merci beaucoup, messieurs. Alors, nous allons maintenant passer.
Now we'll go to the Q&A. first in French. So reporters with questions, please raise your hand. Yes. We will bring you a mic. I would ask you to identify yourself. Hello, everyone. Minister, my question is for you, Mr. Fitzgibbon. Access to the network in general. My question? What will you do in the case of a major outage? The strategic networks in Quebec, from James Bay in the north, all these strategic actors. Our strategic network is not an issue now. It's the distribution for the vegetation. But the power provision will continue. We've had major improvements over recent years, so I think that's good. Great. Now, the union in Quebec City asked for several $1 million to adapt to climate change. Will there be additional funds? I looked at the budget. I don't see a lot of money devoted to that. I think we have to start with Hydro-Quebec, responsible in major part. And it's good to note that Hydro-Quebec has doubled its investment in controlling vegetation. That's the major problem with all these outages. In rural areas, many investments have been made to trim trees. But in Montreal, it's more complicated. We want to keep our trees. But Hydro-Quebec is already investing a lot. $125 million spent this year alone just to control the vegetation. Yes. The government, Hydro-Quebec, municipalities, clearly what we've seen with these extreme weather events will probably continue. We'll have to take measures. Earlier, we talked about posts. They're falling. We have to solidify them. And wires. We have to protect the electric wires. There are many new ways of doing things to mitigate, because we'll have to live, we'll be experiencing even more weather. So one question and one follow-up. Sorry, many reporters. Hello, Radio Canada. My colleagues told us this morning that we're short of dozens of cable workers in Montreal. Does that affect the resilience of the network? And should there be a plan in place to improve the staffing at that level? Well, at a high level, I was also working on that aspect. Where people live, it does not reflect how we address the issues. Currently in Montreal, Hydro-Quebec has the people needed to do the repairs. There are 1,400 people right now in Montreal. So some people left Montreal to move to rural areas. In cases like this, I don't think there's an issue here. But perhaps you have more to say? Yes, I did read the article. A recent announcement of movement of personnel, like many businesses. Many people remain on the South Shore of Montreal, and they want to get closer to home. That's very normal, but when we're in an outage here, we have all the flexibility needed to, like today, I can send teams, take teams from all over Quebec and send them to Montreal and Montérégie. There's movement. I can assign people on the North Shore, and they'll go. And to fill the positions, I can get service. It's assured. My follow-up is for the minister. With regard to energy efficiency, experts say that the laws in Quebec don't have enough bite to improve efficiency. For example, in France, there's a law now that prohibits the high energy consuming apartments. What do you have to say about that? I have to give a lot of credit to Hydro-Quebec. They've announced that they were going to increase up to 25 terawatt hours for the power. And consequently, it's not, there's new technology, new approaches. Hydro-Quebec is studying this. And we will be launching our consultations with the experts, and we want, with Hydro-Quebec, make alterations to the various laws, including energy laws in Quebec, to allow what you've mentioned, because we're in another environment. We have to control the energy, and things to be added to our system. I don't have a specific answer to your question, but yes, the experts will help us find more efficient ways that will probably end up with changes in the law. Any others? Yes, with Nouveau Info. When half the customers in Montreal are out of power and you say there's a few changes to be made to the wires, don't you think there's going to be much bigger changes over the next decade so that a metropolis like Montreal doesn't... Well, yes, we have to look at the context. There's a lot of wire burial here. Yesterday I learned that 50% is already buried cable in Montreal. So we have taken measures at Hydro-Quebec. And the trees, we like them, we want to keep them. When we see 15-centimeter branches falling on wires, well, then we'll have to cut all the tree limbs over 15 centimeters, but that's not realistic. But Hydro-Quebec identified measures to protect the cables and solidifying posts. I think Hydro-Quebec is aware that it has to be increased. The extreme weather events, we're going to have more than in the past, so we have to do something. But at the same time, there will be outages too. It's to reduce the time of outages, and we've seen over the past 2 days. And the 300,000 people who remain without power tonight, when will they be reconnected? Well, we're aiming for... We'll have that reading this day with the winds to see the impact, because there's new outages that appear sometimes. So I can't give you a number for the final client to be reestablished, but we know some will have to wait till Sunday and potentially Monday. When I see outages popping up again, if we have another 500 tonight, we can't control all that. But once the winds drop over the coming days, we'll have more favorable weather conditions to accelerate the reconnection for the remaining customers. Thank you. Are there French-speaking journalists who haven't had a chance to? Yes, we'll be limited to 2 questions. We'll now go in English.
You said you're very satisfied with the response of Hydro-Quebec. Some people living in the West Island and Laval are saying they haven't seen a truck and they've been without power since Wednesday. So what do you say to these people when you say who are going to have a hard time with you saying that you're very satisfied with the response?
Well, there's no question we're living with a crisis, energy crisis. What I said is that we're not where we were in '98. The transmission line, for example, are all in operation. The strategic assets of Hydro-Quebec are all been maintained, which is good. In '98, we had a different issue. So thanks to the investment that was made. As far as what's going on in the urban area, of course, we're dealing with the vegetation control, so we're dealing with trees, so it's difficult to prevent that from happening unless we cut all the trees. Now, we've got 1,400 people on the ground right now working with to address all these issues, and given that we were at the peak of 1.2 million people without service almost, and now more than 45% have been reestablished within like 24 38 hours, I think that's a good news. Of course, the last to be reconnected could be done, as they said, on Sunday or Monday. But I think in the circumstances, I think we need to be satisfied with the...
Well, given that what you were talking about with the vegetation issue, do you think that there's been not enough cutting of tree branches? I mean, should we be looking to add people to cut branches? What is the challenge of getting more people to do that work so that these types of things don't happen again?
There's 2 issues. One is the amount of money we put into it, and the B is the labor issue. On the amount of money we put into vegetation control, Hydro-Quebec has doubled their investment over the last few years. So this year they spent close to, I think, $125 million. Now we understand this is more of a rural area. We're not going to cut trees in Montreal, right? It's not going to be accepted. So therefore, and the labor, there's 1,400 people on the ground right now. Even if we had 200 more, at one point, controlling the workflow is very important. We're really now in the surgery of what has to be done. So the number of staff available to deal with the issues is sufficient. And people that were outside Montreal are in Montreal right now working on it, and hopefully they're going to be in the West Island very soon.
And just for the other gentleman from Hydro-Quebec about the wind, can you please explain how the wind is complicating things and what can we expect? Are we going to add more outages?
Yeah, so we're not expecting a huge number of new outages, maybe a minor amount. And why is the some tree branches that got loose from the freezing rain event that we had on Wednesday with the wind gusts could maybe detach and hit our distribution lines and cause some outages, but should not be too much of a worry. But we're still monitoring the situation, and it's at those level of wind gusts. It's not an issue either for our workers to continue working to restore power.
Cobino Duro, CBC News. Just like my colleagues at Radio-Canada, I want to ask Hydro-Quebec and Mr. Fitzgibbon about the lack of people in Montreal prepared for the ice storm. Is that posing a problem in terms of getting power restored? And what can Hydro-Quebec do to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future?
Well, I'll be very quick because Hydro-Quebec can answer that better than I am. But the issue here is that we witnessed over a few years people from Hydro-Quebec moving from Montreal to regions, but they're still Hydro-Quebec employees. And as it relates to the issue we're facing right now, these people have been back to Montreal to operate. So therefore, whether they live in Blainville or Terrebonne, they can still come and work in Montreal. So I don't think that's an issue per se. And there's been other people also that have been added to the team. There's 1,400 people working on the ground right now, which I think is sufficient, but I'll let my colleague.
Well, first of all, I mean, it's not an issue for the situation we have to manage right now. So, I mean, when we plan and we see a situation like we have to, like the one we are in at the moment, I mean, we know the available workforce we have, and we recall those people, and we didn't have any issue recalling all the people needed to work on the event at the moment. As the broader question, I mean, I think it's not just a situation we have at Hydro-Quebec. I mean, it's more difficult to have people attracting people to work on Montreal Island. And for sure, yeah, I won't enter into details, but we have some initiative in place to be able to mitigate that impact and have more people working in our crews in Montreal.
Alors, y a-t-il des journalistes qui n'ont pas eu l'opportunité de poser des questions?
Reporters who didn't have the chance to ask a question?
Alors, c'est ce qui met fin
So,
à la question et à la
therefore,
conférence de
the
presse.
Q&A
Merci à toutes et
and
tous
press
pour votre
conference
présence.
is now
Je vous souhaite
done.
une bonne journée.
Thank you for coming and have a nice day.
Okay, we've just been listening into a live update from the Hydro-Quebec headquarters. In the wake of that vicious ice storm on Wednesday, there has been a massive effort to restore electricity and clean up the damage from that ice storm. And the main takeaway today is that there are 1,400 Hydro-Quebec workers on the ground right now because there are still hundreds of thousands of people across the province without electricity. In Ontario as well, there are thousands, but this was just an update on Quebec from Hydro-Quebec. So here's the progress. Hydro-Quebec saying they've gotten more than 500,000 customers restored since yesterday. They're hoping to get that number up to 800,000 plus by the end of the day today with all those crews out there working.